Okay, so welcome to everybody. We had about 50 people assuring us they were going to be here, and this is, what happens. But I think what happens usually is people sort of filter in with stuff over the next 40 minutes or so. So those who do can just come in. If you don't want to be filtered in front of, then you can welcome to move further forward. Otherwise, you can stay where you are. So I just want to say, first of all, welcome. And my name is Janine. I'm one of the directors at the Center for Coaching here at the GSB. And yeah, it's always an absolute privilege to be able to speak to people who come here voluntarily to find out more. So I have some things I've prepared, but I'd like to also just, say a few words, but then also I'd like to invite you to perhaps just give me any particular questions you're sitting with, so I can make sure that I cover them in the next couple of hours. Yeah? And then we'll also have time for a Q&A at the end, so that at least we've got those two areas covered. So what can I tell you? What can I tell you about the Center for Coaching? All right, well, let's see. In 1999, the year 1999 and 2000, Craig O'Flaherty started studying coaching in the United States at a coaching school called New Ventures West, which has been going now almost 30 years. It's one of the oldest and most long-standing coaching schools in the USA, in San Francisco, which, as you know, is full of those very wonderful and esoteric people, and they generate lots of thought leadership processes. And in fact, James, who's the founder of Integral Coaching, his journey started about 30 years ago when he started doing work with a chap called Fernando Flores and becoming curious about how people develop and grow. And in those days, the word coaching didn't even exist. In fact, in those days, OD, organizational dynamics, didn't exist yet. There was, nobody even talked about human resources. It was personnel and payroll and things like that. And so he was at the very forefront of this movement to start to engage with human beings in a different way. And over the years, through trial and error, that sort of first school of people started experimenting with how to engage and get people to really learn and engage more in the workplace and to overcome their obstacles. And many from those days, in the 70s, people went out. So you had people like Peter Senge, he was someone that they worked with for a while. We all went out and started these new disciplines and branches of working with human beings. Okay. And what James has done over the last 30 years is to create a school of coaching that is now a global force. So we at the Center for Coaching are the South African, or the African, we hold the African teaching, we're the ones that teach integral coaching in Africa and Australia at this stage. But this kind of work is taught all over in the USA, in the UK, in Switzerland, and Singapore, and elsewhere, in Denmark as well, I believe. So, what is it about this style of coaching that makes it a universal application? That's one of the things that has always excited me, and I want to share that story with you as we go through this evening. What is it that makes this way of coaching so particularly appropriate for South Africa and for where we are? Having said that, going back to the original story of how did we start. So in 99, 2000, Craig started his journey of learning how to coach, and he flew to San Francisco for a year and a half doing his studies, and at the end of his professional coaching certificate, he said to James, he said, this coaching is needed in Africa, and I want to take it there. And so he had a vision and a dream. And he came through he was living in Cape Town, he came through to UCT in the business school, and he said, this needs to be in every business school curriculum, in every business, coaching should exist. But of course, in those days, no one had heard of coaching. No one even knew what he was talking about. And I had recently joined the faculty. I'm a lecturer here at UCT lecturer. I used to lecture in strategy and company analysis here at the business school. And I bumped into Craig. In fact, he supported me on one of my programs. And he explained what he was doing, and he wanted to open a center for excellence here. And so together, he managed to persuade the dean here to go forward and allow the Center for Coaching to open. It's an independent entity here on campus, but we operate under the Executive Education banner at the GSB. So my role is that of academic director. I'm both on the UCT staff and the director of the Center for Coaching. Craig is obviously the foundational director, but the two of us, together with the core team, have started off this center since 2001, where we ran our first two-day program. And it's now 13 years later, 12, 13, 14, anyway, my maths isn't so good as you can see. Anyway, it's a long time later, and we're still going actually from strength to strength. So there is something about what we do that means people who come, they then send other people on it. And I think that's all that you can't get a more thrilling endorsement than when your graduates are the ones that actually send people to you. So that's the spirit of the start of the school and how it was birthed. Both Craig and I are absolutely passionate about the difference that this can make to the human beings who we engage with. It's not easy to change people or societies or communities. And some people are talented and brilliant at doing big change processes and getting lots of people at once. And I think I realized that for me, the best way I can contribute is if I can coach just one person so that they show up differently in their lives and that the people that they're with feel differently and more positive and suffer less, then that's making a difference. So it's almost like a virus. Though that's a sensitive topic, I shouldn't say that actually. All right, so that's the story and journey I would like to share with you tonight. Is a little bit about where we come from and how we operate, and what do we mean by coaching. What is coaching? Because of course there are many different schools of coaching out there, just like there are many different schools of therapy. Right? So what is this one? And that's what I'd like to share. So that's a little bit of what I want to do, a little bit about myself. I'll tell you one more thing about myself. So not only was I intrigued by this, but I'd done a lot of studies, a lot of academics, a lot of, everything, and I always felt somehow a little bit empty inside, if I could just climb that corporate ladder and reach the top, then I would feel happy. If I could just do this, then I would feel happy. And so I climbed that corporate ladder and I got to the top and I felt worse, actually, if anything. And it was just, and then I started teaching. I thought that will make me happy. Didn't quite hit the mark. But when I received coaching, actually received it, before I'd learned how to do it, I first received coaching for 6 months. In those 6 months, I learned more about myself than I'd ever learned in my entire life. It was truly astounding. I could not believe it. And that just captured me. And I said, if I can learn to teach this, I will be really making a difference. So this is work I do. Actually, it's coincidental that I get paid for it. It's very nice I get paid for it. Actually, I do it because I love it and it's such fun. So that's the good part. Okay. So what I'd like to do is not necessarily go around each individual, but perhaps just take a moment to say, what is it that you would like to get out of tonight? Any particular questions that any one of you might be sitting with just so I can make sure that I've covered it. Anything in particular? Yeah.
Do you think you need a certain type of personality to be able to coach?
Oh, such a good question. Okay. Do we need a certain type of personality to be able to coach? And I'm actually going to answer you straight away because it's such a great question. You know, I have seen every conceivable kind of human being arrive at our programs. It's actually never ceases to amaze me how different the students are that come to us. Normally more mature students, people in their second or third careers, but not always. We've had some people, we've had 1 or 2 below 30, but not often. We've had someone of 78 once came. That was awesome. So, but anyway, anywhere between those two. In terms of personality, though, we've had people arrive who haven't ever done a day of reflection or personal work or never worked with a human being in their whole life. And they go through the most amazing journey. And we've had people come who are highly trained, highly skilled professionals, sometimes psychologists, sometimes counselors of many years, or people who've already been coaching for many years and they want to come and get their certification. And not one of them has said, this wasn't worth my while. And we've also had people who come in very fierce and aggressive, some who have no idea how to listen, who can't even listen, even some, you know, people who jiggle all the time, those sort of people, who just say, I don't know how I could ever do that. And yet that's part of the program, is how do you work with yourself so that you become able to connect with another person. So the secret of this course, you think you're coming to learn about coaching and about doing it to other people, but actually you have to also, at the same time, learn about yourself. So that is the only request, the only prerequisite, I would say. If you're not willing or able to look within and to be reflective and to look at yourself and your own behaviors, your own patterns, your own, you know, what works and what, to challenge yourself, then you'll struggle with this program. So some people come here and get surprised. Others come here because of it. So far, most people, no one's yet arrived and left because of it. But I think a lot of people don't actually sign up because of that. They just see the pre-course work and they go, no, no way. So that's the only prerequisite.
Sometimes it seems to me there's just a thin line between counseling and coaching. So what is the...
Okay, so that question, if we can hold on to it, because I'm going to do what's the definition of coaching, and then the difference between counseling, therapy, mentoring, consulting, teaching, all that stuff. We're going to spend some time there, because that's actually the big thing that people struggle with. Okay, so that's a great question. Right, we'll get to that one.
I think for me, it's just understanding the concept of integral coaching. You know, what is it and how it differs to if there are any other philosophies of coaching out there.
Okay.
What makes this unique?
Right, so what is it about integral that makes it unique to other forms? Okay, and I'll talk more about integral, and I'm not going to do a whole analysis of what other schools do and don't do, because I haven't studied those methodologies, but that's as well. We'll definitely cover that one.
Nowadays, everyone calls themselves a coach, and that's one thing. This course is not very cheap and so on, but how will this really make a difference in differentiating you from others? Except that it's got a good name out there, but is there still a future for coaching and to invest in becoming a coach? With everyone calling themselves a coach, and sometimes people had a bad experience with coaching and they will just say,
no. Again, a great question. I think what is very exciting is that South Africa is one of actually the world's leaders in becoming very acutely aware of the professionalizing the coaching it used to be a fad, and then I think we became an industry because everyone, you know, just jumps on that bandwagon and let's do coaching. Yeah, and I've been in HR for 30 years, so now I'm a coach. So you just change the business card and, you know, and now I'm a coach. And that's true, that is still the case. You can still call yourself a coach with no training whatsoever. But what is really interesting is that there are a number of global surveys that have been done. South Africa has something like a 92% awareness of coaching rate in the corporate space. And most of those corporate people, many of them, I didn't say all, have attended some form of coach training. And because we have various associations like COMENSA, the Coaching and Mentoring Society of South Africa, they have an entire membership category just for people who will be using coaches. And there, for example, they talk about how to choose your coaches. So the criteria that people look at is what course, where did you study, how long did you study for, so how many training hours did you get, and is the program, does it have some sort of credible credential, like ours is through the International Coach Federation. And we also registered through the Health Professionals Council. So people look at the credibility of where you study. That's one dimension. That's a huge differentiator. How long you studied for and where you studied, and is it an accredited program? The other key differentiator is how many coaching hours you have, how much coaching experience you have behind your name. Right? So, and whether you are credentialed as a coach. So to become credentialed as a coach, through the International Coach Federation, for example, we'll talk, there's a little bit of information there. But having studied here, it's easy for you to become credentialed as a coach, as long as you get the experience. So those are the two dimensions people look at, where you studied and how much experience you have.
You touched on it earlier about age. So I think there's quite a strong perception out there that you need to be, like with age comes wisdom, which I don't argue, but that if you're young, you can't be an effective coach, or you probably can't coach someone older than you because they have more wisdom than what you do.
Yeah, I remember when I started, I mean, it's a terrible thing to say, but when I started coaching, most of my coachees were older than me, which caused me a lot of, I was constantly amazed that these, you know, senior executives who were older than grey hair and everything, and there I was feeling very inexperienced and young, but I suppose really then I was about 40. But anyway, and yet they allowed me to coach them. And now, of course, most of my coachees are younger than me, but nevertheless, it hasn't actually changed things. So what we say, what we urge people to say is, it's not your years of experience, because I have met youngsters who have more wisdom within them from the University of Life than older people who perhaps have led a very sheltered existence and perhaps have had very few experiences. So in terms of the marketplace, what do people look for with a coach? They are interested to know your background. But there are many people who will specifically look for a younger coach who perhaps can support them in a business that caters for young people, for example. So who is it? I think it's one of the big IT, whether it was Bill Gates. He always has he uses a mentor who's always 16 or 17 years old. He will actually, so that's a mentoring relationship. But a lot of people say, no, they want a younger coach. That's the context of it. So different strokes for different folks. And coaches are also starting to specialize, by the way. So you're finding that we'll have a class of students, and there'll be students who actually want to focus on specializing, coaching families, or coaching young mothers, or coaching teenagers. Not everybody who comes to study with us wants to be an executive coach, coaching senior executives. or junior, or anyway, anyone in the corporate world. Not everybody wants to coach in the corporate world. And that's the other thing with this style of coaching. It's applicable across the spectrum. It's not only in the business.
What do you tell somebody who says he wants to do coaching just for personal development? And
Sorry,
then,
could you repeat?
what do you tell somebody who says he wants to do coaching just for the personal development?
Okay, you mean to study coaching?
Yes.
Yes.
And then the second part is, you get a rising superstar who says, I'm going to do this coaching. Does he get credited towards the MBA program?
Okay, so let me start with the first question. Many of our students are people who never plan to become professional coaches. In fact, often as much as half or 60% of the class are made up of leaders who are working, and they're not planning to leave their work in the near future. But they appreciate that learning how to coach will not only develop them, but also enable them to engage with the people around them in a different way. So it's actually really interesting how many people are here specifically for the personal development. We've even had some people who don't even finish all the assignments because they say, you know what, I've had all the personal growth I need and want, and I don't care about the certificate because I'm not doing it because I want to coach. Those are few and far between, and obviously we get very depressed when somebody does that because it's nice to everyone to certify. But that's exactly the spirit of it. There's so much personal growth. Because why? You can't coach someone unless you know what's going on for yourself. And so a lot of this is inwardly focused. So that's the answer around what makes people do it. It's not always about becoming a coach out there. In terms of can you use this as a gateway to an MBA, at this stage there's no link between the two. Yeah. The MBA admission criteria they don't have coaching we offer an elective, a coaching elective. I was here on Sunday running the elective. And was that yesterday? It was yesterday. It was yesterday. Yeah. And some of the mentors are also here who were helping me there. So, yeah, so it's run as an elective on the MBA, but it won't help you to get in on the MBA per se, directly. Okay. All right, so maybe let me then start. I had a list of other things, but what I'm feeling is let me start with, so what is integral coaching? Perhaps that's a place to start. Then we all have the same platform. So sometimes, rather than a fancy presentation, it's nice to be able to talk in pictures. So my artistic talents are renowned. Let's say somebody comes to you and they're wrestling with something. They're a little bit stuck, okay? It does not mean that they are necessarily having a negative stuckness. Sometimes people are offered two promotions and they're not sure which one to take. You know what I mean? Or they're feeling unsure about the next phase of their life, both of which are exciting, but they're still stuck. So there's a moment of immobility in your life. And let's say the person comes to you to ask for help. Now, if that person was coming to you for help, and you were just a friend or a manager, and you weren't coaching them at all, what sort of things might you do? How might you engage with them? Somebody comes to you and asks you for your help with life. What might you do?
Listen, ask questions.
Okay, I might listen and ask questions. What else might I do?
Give advice.
Yeah, I might give advice and say, well, here's my 10 cents worth. We often do that for friends. What else? They really stuck. I might tell them. Say, here's what I think you should do.
You ask them what they think they should do.
Okay. So you might say, okay, tell me what you think. All right. So you might try and draw it out of them. You might, we see this a million times a day in the workplace. I might say, you know what? Here are 3 suggestions. Now select the one that feels best to you. Okay. I might realize that they're missing some information and I might teach them something. I might say that here's a teaching moment. Let me teach you how to do that. Great. If I'm a mentor, what is it that mentors in particular do particularly well? What is mentoring for you? They teach from the basis of where?
They share the experience.
They share their experiences. So they teach, but usually from their experience. So that's the fantastic thing about mentors. I say everybody needs a mentor. It's like, how can somebody share with you, this is this scar on my back, and this is where I fell down. So, here's a story. It brings it alive. It makes it real. In fact, research shows that people tend to select mentors that look like them, that often are the same gender, that often have the same career path, that have the same tastes. You want to be like your mentor. You want to often emulate even characteristics sometimes, not always. But so a mentor will share their experience. They'll say, but this is how you could go about doing it. Fantastic. What would a consultant do?
Tell you what you must
Advise.
No. If a consultant didn't come to you and say, look, I've done a whole needs analysis, and here are my 3 options, and this is actually the preferred option because, if they didn't do that, you'd be a little worried about, why am I hiring this person? So a consultant is an expert who's going to come in and give you some really expert advice. Also fantastic. We're going to talk about a counselor and therapy just now, because there's an alignment there that's slightly different. But all these ways, if I'm a manager, somebody comes to me and they're stuck, I might tell them what to do. I might even do it myself. Yeah. How often do you say, don't worry, I'll do it. Just let me get it done. It's quicker. At least I know it'll be done right. Okay. So all of these are fabulous, wonderful, very, very appropriate at particular times, and we need all those ways of working with people in the world. However, none of them are coaching. And here's the news flash. Even if they're done nicely, they're still not coaching. So people who want to change performance management into performance coaching, and they give that manager absolutely no training in how to coach, what are they actually doing? They're saying, please do what you did before, but do it more nicely, please. So we don't just induct people, we give them induction coaching. And again, we don't train the person on anything to do with coaching. We just say, induct them in a nicer way. Just be nice about it. Connect with the person. Talk to them somehow, differently. And managers are not even asked to manage anymore. They're asked to then coach their staff. But what does that mean? When actually you have targets, you have duties, you have standards, you have requirements, you need to tell people what to do. And in many organizations, actually what they're replacing the word, management is like, now not such a fine word anymore. It's like, no, we must coach our staff. We don't manage them anymore. So it's just be nicer. Be a nicer manager, and that's good. You're coaching. Okay, so that's the snag. All these things are powerful and useful, but the wordings become muddy over time. So what is coaching? Right. Well, integral coaching is a way of engaging with somebody else where I understand what it is about you, what it is about how you are thinking, how you are feeling, how your instincts are telling you what to do. That's the gut, by the way. Or just in general, behaving in the world that is causing you to relate to this stuckness, challenge, opportunity, whatever it is, to relate to it in such a way that you feel stuck. You're not sure what to do next. And that's the fundamental difference. But that has a number of really important implications. So let me pause there before I even tell you a story about it. But any comments about, so what does that mean though? What does that mean? What does that mean for you, the coach?
You must have your act together.
In what way? In what way do you need your act together?
Because there's a balance of things that you have to look at. And you also have to be aware of the person that you are. I think with my heart, and my friend thinks with her brain. You know, and they both support you differently.
Yes, yes, exactly. So something, so for those who couldn't hear, if you think, you're the coach, you think with your heart and your friend thinks with her brain, which supports one differently. Now, for somebody who's all heart, a relationship challenge that your friend might be, your coachee might be stuck with, might be no trouble at all. Because for you, it's very easy what needs to happen. And you can do it easily. The snag is, so if you were giving advice, if you were being a friend, or if you were being a consultant or whatever, you could say, well, that's how you're going to sort John out. You know, just do these 3 things and he'll be putty in your hands. Okay. The problem is, when you're coaching, you don't matter. In fact, one of the big things with integral coaching is you give no advice. You are there to listen, to witness, and to understand the coachee, what it is about them that's causing them to get stuck. And you work with them for them to get unstuck. So you are not important. It's not about you. Your experience doesn't help them because you're not stuck, they're stuck.
So is it also related to the relationship?
Yes, yes. Can you see? Because what is it about that relationship that's so important?
Trusting, respectful.
Yes. Mutual respect. Mutual respect and mutual trust has to be present. Because otherwise, they're not going to tell you how they're really thinking or really feeling or really behaving. They're going to tell you what they think you want to hear. And then you can't help them properly because you're working on incomplete or insufficient data. So it becomes absolutely critical. And the secret to building this mutual trust and mutual respect is something that is very hard to master, and that's about non-judgment. You cannot sit there judging your coachee and thinking to yourself, oh, this is so easy. I've seen this 100 times. Why can't they just get it right? Surely you can't have any of those thoughts because people feel it. On a subliminal level, they sense it immediately when you're judging them. And they just go, okay, shut down. Yeah.
I fail to understand how is it possible for you, if somebody's stuck, how is it possible for you to just listen and at the end of the day come up with a solution, even if it's not you? How does the coach help the coachee come up with a solution without even giving advice? How is it possible?
How is it possible?
Yeah.
So sometimes the best way is through stories. Let me share a couple of real examples with you. It is, I mean, that's the whole beauty of coaching, isn't it? Is how do you allow somebody to see new possibilities where they were before they were stuck. And remember, coaching isn't necessarily about fixing the problem. In fact, what we talk about is saying we coach the person, not the problem. So what is it about this person's pattern of behaviors, their pattern of behaviors, that is causing them to get stuck? So here's an example. I was coaching a lady who headed up a team of people in a financial services business, and they had to do a lot of complex documentation forms. And I was coaching her on work-life balance and a number of other things, and learning to delegate and so on and so forth. And she came to me one day, we were sort of a little way around it, down on coaching, and she said, Janine, I need your help with something. And I said, so, okay, what is it? And she said, I have a staff member who I'm going to have to fire. I said, wow, okay, that's quite, this is a South African person in the South African environment. It doesn't happen overnight. So I said, so that's quite a big thing. You haven't mentioned this before. No, she says, this woman is so lazy, I'm going to have to get rid of her. There's no way, nothing else. I've tried everything. I said, well, tell me a little bit more about it. No, I've tried everything I can, and there's nothing. She's just lazy. She said, there's a particular form. I've sent her for training over and over again. She won't do this very complex particular part of the form. I have to do it every other, at least 2 or 3 times a week. I have to work late to cover for her. I'm not prepared to do it anymore. And she just won't do it. So she must go. Now, the question isn't, so what's wrong with the woman with the form? The question for me was, so what is it about my coachee that is causing her to label this person as lazy, when maybe the person is lazy, but maybe she isn't? I wonder what's happening here. So I said to her, well, tell me something. How long has this been going on for? And she said, oh, well, gosh, about a year. I said, okay, and how long did this person work for you? Is this person working for you? She says, no, about 10 years. I said, really? 10 years? Wow. And so for 9 years, what was she doing? If, it's been a problem only for a year. She said, well, actually, she used to be my top performer. I thought, oh, that's interesting. So you had a top performer for 9 years, and then 1 year, yeah, no, she's lazy. She's lazy. We got a new SAP SAP system, and she's just too lazy to bother to learn it. Can't. And honestly, I said to her, well, imagine if there might be, so now I'm sitting there, I can't give her any advice, but what as a coach I can do is ask her, is to try and get her to see the situation in a slightly different way. So to perhaps look at it from a different perspective and look at it from the outside. So I said to her, well, imagine this isn't your employee, it's somebody else. And somebody came to you and said that somebody suddenly was a top performer and then became very lazy. What might be going on for that person? Hypothetically. Nobody you knew, just hypothetically. And she was like, well, obviously not my lady. No, not your lady, but hypothetically. Well, maybe something's happened in personal life. Okay, what else could it be? Well, maybe she's got a health problem. Maybe, and she came up with 3 or 4 different scenarios. I said, okay, so that was that problem, hypothetical thing. So coming back to your lady here, what of these scenarios may or may not apply to her? And she said, well, to be fair, I've never actually asked her any of those sort of questions. Whenever I've talked to her, it's been about her spreadsheet, this form. She says, I've never actually asked her any of these questions. And I said, so, that's interesting. So what do you see as a possibility now? And she said, okay, well, I'll go and talk to her. I'll go and talk to her, and then let's see. So, of course, I was very curious. This whole conversation took like the whole coaching session. So, because she was initially, she didn't want to hypothesize, she didn't want to play with the idea, she didn't want to even consider that something else was happening. But eventually we sat there. So off she went, and 2 weeks later, we had our next session. Now, of course, I've been thinking about this and so curious to know what's happening. So when she gets in, she starts and she talks about other things, and I'm like, where's this giant problem that was sitting on her desk, last time? So eventually I say, so tell me, you know, you mentioned there was this person you were going to fire. Oh, that, she says. I said, yes, that. Oh, no, she said, well, I actually decided to talk to her, so I booked a meeting room. I took her off the floor. We sat down, and I said to her, you know, tell me, this is the challenge I'm having with the form. I can't and don't want to do it anymore for you out of hours. What's happening? What could be happening for you? What's going on in your life? And she said, and you know what she said? I said, no, I can't imagine what she said. And she said, well, actually, she told me that she was convinced that if, after all the training I'd given her, she still got this form wrong, that I would fire her. So she made a vow to herself to never do the form. So, oh, really? So what did you do then? She said, well, then we sat and I talked about it, and, you know, we agreed that I would help her slowly, and we do a little section at a time, but I agreed that I certainly would not fire her for not getting it right. And she said that absolute fear was just, she was absolutely certain she would be fired. She had to spend quite some time settling her down. So now that is an example of what we call a spontaneous coaching moment. So coaching doesn't always work like that, yeah? Because we have what we call 3 levels. We have many levels of coaching. But if this is time, and this is the depth of the topic. So the coachee arrives. In this case, she arrived and she said, oh, I've got this employee who's giving me a hard, you know, I want to fire her. Actually, we spent 1 session on it. It wasn't a very deep topic. Okay. The coachee had an insight. She said, well, all right, I haven't spoken to this coachee. I hadn't spoken to the staff member. Let me go and talk to her. And she went off, and she was able to go and talk to her, have the conversation, resolve the challenge, and move on. So the issue was done and dusted in 1 session, basically. Why? Because the coachee had that capability innately sitting there, and she could access it. The problem might have come in, though. Let's say she had gone out and said to me, don't worry, I'll go talk to this person, and she had come back and said to me, I wasn't able to talk to her. I felt uncomfortable. It didn't work. I couldn't talk to her. I need to fire her still. All right. Then there's a pattern there. So this first pattern was around the assumptions and the judgments she made about people. She just jumped to conclusions and didn't think twice. Okay. That pattern, she was onto like a flash. All right. And I'll tell you what she did with it later. But she realized, okay, maybe I've made an assumption. Was she able to go and speak to that person, call her aside, have a conversation about that? Yes. Let's say she come back to me and said, no, I can't. Then we end up doing, so this first type of coaching is spontaneous or corridor coaching, informal coaching. You don't need to be in multiple sessions with someone. The type 2 coaching, which we call competency coaching, that's what we teach on the ACC. That's the 6 months you will be looking at. You will learn this spontaneous coaching as well, but you will also learn over 6 months how to develop somebody's capability to be able to do something that for some or whatever reason they've never been able to do before, or they haven't been able to do it in that way before. So she might have had, and she didn't, but I don't have a story about that one, but she might have had a challenge with actually pulling people aside and having a direct conversation with them. And then I may have had to work with her over multiple sessions, developing her capacity to be able to have a direct conversation. How did we do that? We do that in two ways. The first one is through language. Noticing people's pattern of language, how they language their reality, how they bring forward a world that is either helpful to them or not so helpful. So we work quite strongly in language. But then we also work with something we call a practice. Okay? And a practice is a habitual pattern of behavior. It could either be something that you notice, which we call a self-observation, something you observe about yourself, you catch yourself doing, you become more aware. So I'll give you an example with this coachee. Her practice, her self-observation, was to start to notice, which I asked her to do, was if we're going to explore this pattern of judging people, all right, why don't you, and we design it together. So you don't ever just tell people what to do, you work with them. But so we work together to say, well, what could she do to walk around noticing if and when she's actually judging people? How would she catch herself in the act of jumping to conclusions and judging, making assumptions about people like they're late? And so I sent her off for the next month or two. She was walking around catching herself in the act. And she found she was particularly apt at doing it during meetings. In fact, she discovered she had a visual, she realized visually, and this is the funny thing, we do so many things we don't realize we're doing. She discovered that she was sitting in meetings and putting a little post-it note on everybody's forehead in her mind, in her imagination, with a word on it that say things like boring or silly or unimaginative or lazy, and she had all these labels. And she didn't realize she was doing it at all. So a self-observation is something that starts to make you aware of your own patterns of behavior. And once you're aware of something, you know, if you're walking around with your shoelace untied, you're one step away from being flat on your face. But the moment you're aware it's untied, you know, you immediately start walking funny. It's like you just want to get down there and fix it. And you first you walk funny, and then you go there, and then you can do something about it. The other kind of practice is not only noticing, becoming more aware, but it's very much around what new pattern of behavior will support this new insight around, for example, jumping to conclusions about people. So an example of a practice is not a solution. We don't ever coach solutions. I never coached her on how to get better relationships going with her team. I coached her on noticing her patterns, right? And so one of her habitual patterns was that she was very, she would often interrupt the team members. She became aware of this too. Not only did she put labels, but she used to interrupt people a lot. And so the small change, which actually led to a massive shift for everybody, was that she decided to do, she said, well, what would help her is to actually just stop before saying anything. Take a breath, and then just check with herself, okay, have I made an assumption here? Yes or no? And do I need to speak right now, or can I wait? You know, because often she just made an assumption and immediately wanted to talk from her own head, and she didn't even finish listening to anybody. So her practice was pause, breathe, notice any sticky labels on anyone's heads, because that's how she picked it up. It was a visual thing for her. And then decide if she wanted to speak. And then sometimes she spoke, but sometimes she didn't. And it was interesting. Within 3 months, her team actually transformed from being one of the most dysfunctional to actually being one of the top performing teams. They won an award and everything. So it was such a nice case study. I said to her, do you mind if I share this story? And she was very happy to do it. But that's an example of where you need to work with someone, multiple sessions, okay, and more than one time to develop their capability to be able to do that. The type 3 coaching, which is what we teach, so this is ACC, what we teach on PCC, the year-long program, is way of being. So that's where, for example, somebody might come to you, and this has happened to me a number of times. You'll get somebody who, let's take, I had a CEO who came to me and said, you know what, I am going to be retiring in the next 2 years, next year, 2 years, and I need to start. I'm used to being very at the front. I'm a strong autocrat, not autocratic, but I lead from the front. I'm like one of these, and I need to learn to step back and to bring my successor in and to mentor him and to not always step in and take charge. And I have no idea how to do that. And I also want to prepare for the fact that I'm going to be retiring in the next few years, and I need to be able to show up in the world differently, because I'm not going to be driving this huge organization anymore. I'm going to be in a different space. And now that's not just a couple of competencies, that's a whole way of being, which is fundamentally different. And that's not going to be done in 6 or 8 or 9 sessions. There you're looking at a year or 2 years of coaching where you work with somebody over time in a very deep way. And that's what we look at in the year-long program. To come to your question around what's the difference between therapy and coaching, I don't know if that's of interest, but often people say, but yeah, what is the difference? Well, one of the big differences is that, let me draw you another picture. Thanks so much. Is that if I have a continuum of, let's say, future and the past, and we have problems, and we have opportunities, okay? A coachee comes to you because they're saying, you know what, I might be stuck a bit in a problem, all right, so I might be somewhere along this continuum here, but I see a future opportunity that I want to move towards. And coaching is all about saying, how do we move you from where you are now closer to this future that you want? What are the behaviors and the capabilities you need to have in order to be able to reach that goal or reach these objectives? So I had a coachee who came to me on a leadership development program, and she said, we had a year together, and I said, well, what is it you'd like to be the theme for the year? What do you want us to work on? She said, I would like to be happy. I said, okay, that was a big one. All right, so we got a year. What would that mean for you? What would that look like for you? How would you know that you were happy or happier by the end of the year? And we took a few sessions, but we boiled it down to 3 things. So it was, she said, I would sleep through the night, because I don't sleep anymore. I would have a better, I would have a solid relationship with my parents, because I'm not really talking to them at the moment, and that bothers me. She said, I wouldn't fight with my boss every day. I'd have a better relationship with my boss. She says, I'm not sure we'll ever be friends, but I need to have a more constructive relationship with him, because it's terrible. And she had a 4th one. She said, and I want to learn to play. She said, I grew up in, being a high achiever. She said, I realized I've never played, ever. I don't know what it means to have fun, just play. So these 4 things would show me that I was in a world where I felt happier than I am now. Now, what happened is on the way, we hit, because coaching, you think you're going to go from here to there, but you don't. You sort of wander around, and you go where your insights take you, but you always have this North Star. On the way, one of her challenges was that she really struggled with authoritarian type people, okay? and her boss was one such person who was given to lots of very dominating sort of statements and sentences. Ironically, very similar to her own style of leadership. So that was interesting. But she got stuck there. She just couldn't get past that. And I said, so how does that feel? Where does that come from? When else in your life have you felt this way? And she realized, she said, you know what? Growing up, my uncle, who lived with us for a long time, and my dad, used to just be like this forceful wall. And I couldn't get, I just felt that they just shut me down completely. So the feeling I have when I'm dealing with my boss is actually how I used to feel when I was small, when my uncle and my dad got together, and it would drive me insane. I would just get enraged straight away. She says, that's the feeling. I didn't realize. So she made this insight, this connection. Okay. Now, if I was a therapist, I would be able to unpack this and say, well, tell me more. Let's go there. I'd be trained on how to unpack this and to understand the meaning and so on. But because we're not therapists, we reference the past. We might well reference the past. It's hard to move forward and not reference the past. But then we say, okay, so how do we work with that insight to say, right, what's the new pattern of behavior that will support you to get past that? So and a therapist is qualified to unpack your past problems, even to diagnose. Therapists are there to diagnose things and to tell you, what approach will heal you. So there's a diagnosis and a healing process here. Whereas you assume that your coachees are functional as any of us are. Okay, but they're not ill. If, however, your coachee does start to need to unpack this, then what I would do is refer them. What I do is we discuss it. We say, who could support you to unpack this difficult thing that's in your past, that's continuing to block you now? And then quite often we form a triadic relationship with the coach, coachee, and a therapist. And then they go to therapy to unpack these things. And coaching, we look very pragmatically as, what is it you would like to get out of this? So I could keep talking all day. I don't know if there are any other questions around just this very high-level view. Sorry,
in the theory that you're talking about on the whiteboard there, around Carl Rogers' theory, I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yes.
It sounds very similar to that.
Yes.
Similar to that.
Yes. So Carl Rogers was a therapist he was, what's it, positive?
Yeah, person-centered approach.
Yeah.
Sorry,
person-centered approach.
Yes, person-centered approach, right. His book actually is one of the books I read. It's foundational to the style of coaching, absolutely. So there are many schools of therapy now which look remarkably similar to coaching, all right? And there are many therapists, who come. So I'm not a therapist, so I always let them talk on our behalf once they've understood the difference. But so far, everyone who's come who is a therapist will say, yes, there are some similarities. Carl Rogers in particular is the most similar in terms of the way he views human behavior and the change. I think perhaps what's interesting is how we combine the use of language, self-observation, and practice to design new habitual patterns of behavior. Then these new patterns support a new way of addressing things in the world. So perhaps to continue with that question, the one slide I will show you because it's just very effective and it's always fun. Yes.
Proceed.
Yes.
You still have me sort of lost there. Because
Okay.
I'm not really getting the difference. Are you saying, as a coach, you then wrote the services of a therapist in to deal with such a problem, or what?
Yes, if the person is stuck, if the person is in distress and can't just visit the past, but they need to unpack and go there. They need to really understand their past, and it's problematic for them. Then we are not trained. We don't train you how to do that.
But
We
we're
train you
saying
to
you
reference
going
it.
there. So,
We're going here and we're
Yes.
referencing the past. So we'll
Yes.
talk about the past.
okay.
We'll use the past as a source of wisdom and of insights, like she got. Yes, that's exactly how I used to feel when my dad and uncle got together. So we use the past, absolutely. But we can't, if someone has, for example, I don't know, an eating disorder or some form of trauma in the past that is causing them to stay stuck now, then I will invite them to consider working with a therapist as well. Yeah.
And then you don't get involved in the process of them being a therapist. It
Well, I
becomes
don't-
a separate process.
Yes. So what I do though is I say, well, go to therapy if they can afford it and they have the time. Go to the therapy and bring the insights into the coaching, and let's move forward with that. So a lot of people do that. Some people, sometimes they only need a few sessions with a therapist to unpack this particular thing, and then they're comfortable. Or if they discover it's a really big thing and it feels more important, then they say, you know what, let's stop the coaching for a while. I need to do this work. But I think a lot of, I don't know if that, helps. Slightly. Okay. What do you still?
I get the impression that coaching somehow gives you tools to sort of, like you say, unlock or unblock those stoppages that are on your route. But with therapy, then you are given certain skills. And if you don't have those skills, I don't see how then coaching takes you where you need to go, because you need those skills from therapy and not from coaching. I don't know.
Are you talking about when you're the therapist, the skills that the therapist has or the coach has, or are you talking about the coaching?
The coaching.
Okay.
Yeah, the coaching.
And it may be that the skills you would get from receiving therapy might be necessary for your ability to move forward. In which case, if you haven't got those skills, you can't move forward. But I will say something. Sorry, and I don't know if you perhaps want to add to that.
No, I was just thinking about, because I'm a social worker, so
Yes.
in my background we studied colleges, so that was where that came from. But I totally understand about that dynamic about not going further, and that's why I was kind of like looking at where we're going, because you can't just remain in one sphere. You're going to have to refer back and bounce around. So and just to kind of keep it safe and keep it above board and not go too deep. And I think that's obviously where the training comes in, to know where your limits are and what professional you actually are. And
Yes. And that's exactly why it's 6 months. People say, why is it 6 months? Why is it so long? In fact, why is it 18 months? Why do you need to do 6 months and then a year to do way of being coaching? That's one of the many reasons why. Because you're dealing with a human being who's terribly complex, and no two human beings are the same. How are you going to work with them?
I was lucky enough to be one of the volunteers for the PPC assessment thing we have in recent.
Right, so you received
So my
coaching.
suggestion would be, and I received coaching for a few hours, yes. My suggestion would be the difference is evident once you've been coached.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. So come and receive coaching.
No, I was a guinea pig, and
That's why, yeah, I
but
remember.
I still. That's why I'm asking this question, because
Okay.
I'm still.
Still wrestling with it.
Yes, yes.
It's a deep and profound question. Yeah, no, I think so. And we're not going to necessarily snag it now. I do want to show you one thing around the theory base that might help.
I'd like to answer a question. I'm busy working with somebody who has...
Sorry?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, guys, can you? Yeah.
There's huge anger issues in management. And he sorted out that he was bullied as a child. And I've got a counselling background too, but I've got to stop myself from focusing just on that. But frequently now he will say, yeah, I'm doing this because I was bullied, hey, because now it makes me feel big to do that. So he's understanding it, acknowledging it, and we've named it. But we're not going to huge therapy into it. But he's acknowledged it and he realizes that's not really the basis of his anger.
Okay. So he's seeing a pattern, and he's seeing what's triggering him. All right. I think maybe what's something that we work with profoundly. In fact, let me just show you to give you a sense of. Okay, there are 5 giant streams of theory that underpin integral coaching, and this is one of our theoretical base is obviously unique to us. So this would be one of the differentiators. So the one is there's a big stream of philosophy, and there's a big stream of philosophical thinkers and philosophy itself around what it means to be a human being, how do human beings grow and change, how do we relate to language, how do we relate to each other. All that insight and wisdom comes, and I'll show you from where, all the way from Socrates to the modern day. Biology and cognitive sciences, the latest, all the way from, again, the more, the way that we, movement can unlock things, all the way through to the latest in neuroscience is another stream of literature. There is a stream here we call spirituality, which is around saying, actually when you start to look at the wisdom that is engaged in every single spiritual path and the spiritual texts that abound in the world, you would be amazed at how many of them are absolute wisdoms and absolute concrete practices that support changing behavior or even a more grounded behavior, or so ideas of practices and ways of being come from this stream of, again, literature. Psychology, with Carl Rogers as one of the grounding psychologists, but you'll see there's a whole area around, there are influences from Jung and all the major psychologists. And then, but this is the part I want to get to, narrative. So where we also work is to say, and this has come fairly recently into the school over the last 6 years or so, is what is the narrative I'm living in? What is the story that I'm living in? So for example, the person is living in a world where anger is a way of dealing with things. So my narrative might be that I'm in a world where it makes perfect sense to get really, really angry when I get past a certain point. Because my narrative will speak to me. I was coaching an executive, he did not have that. Okay, no, I'll tell you someone who I was coaching similar, although not with anger, but a very forceful Russian man, all right? And I don't even see him all the time. We have some face-to-face and some telephonic sessions. And there he is in the Ukraine, and he's this enormous Russian guy with a big voice. He says, Janine, says, we need performance. We need to get going. He says, the people, they must perform. We must get results, or else I'm dead. They will just kill me. And he's like, and he is very fierce. I mean, he's big and he's intimidating. And he's being nice to me at the time. Okay. So I can imagine with his team, he's like, we must get this right. And so the narrative he was living in, and that we came up with together, is that he was living in the world as a warrior. In fact, we chose a Cossack warrior because they're very fierce, they're very independent, they lead from the front, and they're ruthless. And he says, I'm survived by my last performance. If I don't perform, I'm dead. And his language, everything about him, his gestures, he talks in statements like this, and it's like a sword fighting with him, it's quite exhausting. And he's very, just one thing, and everything's a statement. There's no inquiry in his language. He couldn't even, and that's even when he speaks Russian, which is a very forceful language, this is true. But still, anyway. So his narrative was that of being a warrior and fighting his way through life. Everything, his language was around winning and losing. And the people out there were going to get him or not. And certainly when things started going pear-shaped in his business, he wasn't going to tell his peers and colleagues at the head office, because they would just, swoop in for the kill as far as he was concerned. There would be no mercy shown. He would be annihilated. And these are the things he said. So when you're working from that narrative, living in the world as a lone Cossack warrior, you can't suddenly start behaving differently very easily. You can't suddenly start saying, because his boss said to him, but why didn't you tell me? And he said, no, I needed to sort it out myself. He said, but if you told us, we could have helped you. And why didn't you help us? Why are you hiding things? And he's like, no, I'm not hiding, it's just I have to fix this. It's my fight. And even then, after that warning, and he got found out that there were all these challenges, and the head office said, you must tell us, he still struggled. So there was a second wave of disaster. And then, all the time I've been saying to him, but, we'll call him Ivan. Ivan, this is, how else could you be in the world? And eventually, the one thing you can do as a coach is offer somebody a new narrative to see if they'd be willing to step into a new space. And so the new narrative I offered him, I said to him, well, imagine if you lived in the world as a community member, as somebody part of a community. How would you be? How would you be? What would you do? Well, how would you think? What sort of things would you say? What would you notice if you were in a community or colleague, an ally? He said, well, I said, when in your life have you been in a community? So he had to go all the way back to his primary school days. That was the last time he was actually in a community of any kind. Okay, because he chose solo sports from age 11 onwards. He did swimming and ice things. And anyway. So he said, no, but when he was little, he remembers being in a team playing soccer. That was his last experience. He said, well, talk to me about the language of community. And so he literally had to relearn the language of community. What are the habits of people? What are their patterns of behavior of people who live in a community? He had to notice that, when he talked in this very fierce and, strong way, people withdrew from him. They literally would step back. And then he started experimenting with his tone of voice and how, and his posture. He didn't loom over people so much anymore. He started sitting back and sitting with people instead of directing from the front. So all these things became possible from the space of narrative. And this is a literature review I did for a research paper, all around, all the way from pre-1900s, whether it's, all the religious traditions, Socrates, Plato, all the way through to, Heidegger, Habermas, and so on. For those of you who are interested, you can look at this later. What I'm trying to say is this school of coaching is a very rich theoretical basis. It's not just sucked out of James's thumb, one fine night where he decides this is how we're going to work with people. So I don't know if there are any, and of course these are the models that we use when we actually coach people, which won't mean a single thing to any of you. And I'm not expecting you to read any of this. It's just for the, to see. There's a lot, and that's just the base, the original theory. Then there's like too much to put on one page. Okay. So I guess many of you are here because you're interested in becoming integral coaches. So I don't know if that gives you a heads up as to what integral coaching is, and maybe we talk a little bit about ACC or the coaching journey itself.
Can I ask a very practical question?
Sure.
So a friend of mine does this course, and it sounds like, so I guess the question is how possible is it to do a course like this if you're working full-time, based on the fact that you need to coach, I think it's 3 case studies or something?
Yes, yes.
So how sort of realistic is that? At what point in one's career, would you suggest fitting something like this in?
Great question. Yes. So, 99% of our students are already in their careers. They are working full-time, often in very senior and highly skilled careers. So people who come to us aren't taking time off. Sometimes people have, and I have to say, it's the way we teach is based on adult learning principles. So obviously the more you put in, the more you're going to get out. For those, if you can spend 3 hours writing up your particular assignment, you're going to get more out of that exercise than someone who, dashes through it in 45 minutes. Okay. So how much you get out of ACC is up to you. But have a look here. So on ACC, there are 3 modules. 3 days, 3 days, and 2 days. So these 8 days are on work days. So it does involve 8 days of not being at the office. And the assignments, and you have about 1 assignment a month you need to do. But the assignments are not like textbook assignments. You don't have to go out and study a textbook and then write it. They're reflective assignments. They're about you. So you're asked to observe yourself and the kinds of conversations you have, for example, and then to write about it in a particular way, through a particular lens, and then you write about that. But in that process, you get a whole lot of insights about your own patterns of behavior and also the implications of conversation. So it's useful stuff, if I could put it that way. Not to say academics isn't useful, because, but still. But in terms of the case studies, yes, you need to coach at least 3 people, each of them for, let's say, between 5 and 8 sessions. So if you are able to do that as part of your job, or to get permission to coach somebody during working hours, life is a lot easier. And you can sort of fit it in. We've scheduled it. You can fit it in so that you'd have 1 coaching session, maximum 2 a week, and you can get enough sessions done. If you have to coach outside in the evenings or on weekends, that's a little tougher. But again, many of our students do that. So most organizations now, even if they don't sponsor you to come on the program, they are only too happy when, if you say to them, you need to do cases, you offer coaching to somebody in the business. I've not heard of many organizations who actually say, no, that's a really bad idea. They might say, no, you've got to do it on your own time. But then if one can take it in a lunch break and do it then, have a bit of an extra long lunch break, it's very possible. And often if the organization is sponsoring you, then they get a big win from that as well. Yeah.
And if I can add a question onto that, how much headspace does one need before a session? So should you give yourself half an hour before? Do you sort of need to go through a process? Is that something to consider? I'm just trying to work out through how practical it is.
Realistically. Yeah, no. Look, ideally...
When you say a long lunch break, is it 2 hours? Is the session kind of an hour? Or is it kind of up to your discretion?
Yeah, most coaching sessions I find are between an hour to an hour and a half. Especially in the beginning where one perhaps isn't as skillful at beginning and ending a conversation. So allow an hour, 1 hour and a half. It very varies for coaching, but allow yourself 20 to 30 minutes before the session to kind of change gear. Because the snag is you're there to connect with another human being, to really be there for them, and presence and your capacity to listen is absolutely critical. So, and if you arrive all in a rush and you're like distracted, you can't really be there for them, and you're not serving them or yourself. So, and ideally, allow yourself 15, 20 minutes afterwards to jot down your notes, because otherwise you can't sit there in the session taking longhand notes. You might jot down a few points, but you want to be able to go somewhere quiet and just gather your thoughts and jot down stuff while it's still fresh. So ideally, in the perfect world, an hour before, an hour for the session, an hour afterwards, 3 hours. In the real world, yeah, Jean's Nadia shaking her head, yeah. In the real world, maybe 15, 20 minutes before, an hour for the session, 15, 20 minutes after. You can do that. Does that help?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
There seems to be quite a lot of different coaching education available present. How do you know, how do you find out which method is for you?
Yes. I think attending this sort of, information evening, going to visit the people who are going to be delivering it, perhaps, receiving coaching from somebody from that school of coaching, reading up on their literature and their background. A lot of people, what they do is that's why we've invited, we have 2 of our graduates here who are professional coaches, who you're very welcome to speak to, or any people of our database. We will give you, go and talk to somebody who's done it. Obviously, I'm terribly biased, so I can only tell you what I believe is the wonderfulness of this. But I would encourage you to go and explore different schools of coaching and say, what is your methodology? Where does it come from? What is your accreditation? What is your history? One of the other differentiators of the school is that we are what we call generative, non-directive, generative coaching. Also in the field of ontological coaching. So an ontology is the study of the way of being. So you have, in a very broad thumb stroke, you have schools of coaching all the way from non-directive or generative. And it's called generative because, for example, that lady I told you about who was very judgmental and so on, she then went on to apply that issue of jumping to conclusions about people to all sorts of other aspects of her life that we didn't even coach on. So she came to me one time and said, you know what, I had a conversation with my mother-in-law for the first time in 10 years. She came round, and I actually realized I had a giant sticker on her forehead, and actually I took it off, and suddenly we actually had a conversation. So generative coaching is where the coachee doesn't need you anymore, versus the schools of coaching which are far more, actually plainly, very unashamedly directive, and they can be quite prescriptive. So certainly in Australia, where I do quite a lot of work, they tend towards this style of what we would call mentoring even, or performance management, performance coaching, of quite a lot of advice giving and so on. I'm not familiar with the theory underpinning this side of coaching, but there are a number of schools. So it's important that you visit them. You go to the place where they deliver the program, if it's an actual, like here, I've always been here at the business school. You meet the people, the course leaders, you meet some of the graduates, say, how does it feel? Those are the kind of things I'd urge you to do. Do your research, and interview graduates, and see if how they feel for you. Because some graduates, you know, I think they embody the style of coaching themselves. So the ACC is 3 modules in between work. You also are placed into small groups, learning groups called coaching pods, and each group has its own mentor. So you're in a bigger group of about 27 people, and then you get formed into small groups of probably about 8 per pod, and you meet. You also, so here's another time requirement, you do need to meet with your pod members at least once a month. Some pods get very excited and they meet every 2 weeks. That's when people have more time, but the pod, you know, self-organizes. So you with your mentor, and that mentor is the one that gives you written feedback on your assignments. We also urge you to buddy up with someone in the class, so you have a buddy coach, a peer, although that's your own system. And you'll find that the community you'll end up generating is absolutely amazing, because you actually learn as much from your fellow students as you do from anything we do or say. Really, and that's what makes it such a rich process. It's a very much pragmatic and experiential. So the way we teach is we'll share a bit of theory, and then you apply it to yourself. Okay, so what is it? And you start to examine and explore your own life. And then you discuss it with someone else and notice what it means for them. So you see that how each person is unique. And then in every module, you have one or more actual practice coaching rounds where you take that new theory and you practice it on each other. So you will be giving coaching and receiving coaching from the very first day that you work with us, study with us. And then you go out and you've got to do it. So your case studies start right after module 1. Very practical.
How many coaching hours do you need for that program? That's required.
Well, so this coaching, so for ACC, you need to do a minimum of 3 case studies for between 5 and 8 times each. So at least 15 hours. If you go the absolute minimum. What we normally say is do at least 4, because typically somebody lets you down. Somebody gets sick or goes on holiday just when you need them to be there, or decides they can't be bothered or whatever. So we say normally, you know, allow for 4 people, 6 sessions each. That's about 24 hours.
Is that required according to Commensa?
No. So Commensa, this program isn't certified with Commensa. Okay. So there are 2 kinds of hours that we talk about. The one is the training hours that you receive, coach-specific training hours. That in our case, Commensa, I'm working with Commensa around the accreditation process, so they're still in process. But in terms of approved international coach-specific training hours, this program gives you 90 hours of coach-specific training. In terms of what do you personally need to do, so if I can put it this way, there are 2 types of things to be aware of. The one is your course. Your course needs a certain number of hours, and on this course you need to receive a certain number of mentor supervision hours, and you need to receive a certain number of you need to receive a certain number of hours of mentoring and a certain number of hours of supervision in order to certify to be an ICF certified program for 90 coach-specific training hours. That you receive automatically on ACC, plus you have to do between 15 to 24 coaching hours for your case studies. Now, That's the course. Right. Got the course, done, got the certificate. Now, what people say is that I want to be credentialed as a coach, me personally. Right? That's a different process. That is a different process, and you can get credentialed through a number of different organizations. The most credible one, and the one that in South Africa most people care about, is the International Coach Federation. Comensa doesn't yet have a process for credentialing courses or for credentialing coaches. We're busy road testing and mapping and getting one up and running, but there isn't one ready yet. So this is for individual. So the individual coach. So if you as an individual want to be credentialed, and this is where it gets terribly confusing, they call their, in order to just be a member of the ICF, okay, you have to have 60 hours of approved coach-specific training. That's all, just to be a member. You have to have at least attended, so you got that all done. Their first line, your most inexperienced, the most junior qualification, or they call it the most junior credential, yes, they call it credential, individual, is what they call an ACC, Associate Credentialed Coach. For that, you need 100 coaching hours, which you start accumulating on your ACC. So say, for example, you're not working and you've got a lot of time. Many people, by the end of their ACC, have actually managed to coach enough people in that year that they've got 100 hours. And as long as you call that person's coach and you're coaching him, the ICF is happy for you to count those as hours. So you need 100 hours, and there are a couple of other little hoops you've got to jump through as well that the ICF will tell you about. If you want to become a professional credentialed coach through the ICF, you need 750 hours. Plus, you need more training. And that's where, if you go to here, your PCC program, and our program happens to be called the same thing. It's just, that's how they did it in the USA. So New Ventures West calls the year-long program the professional coaching course. Okay, that's 4 modules of 4 days each, and this program has 186 hours of training, just on its own. So that qualifies you. So by the time you finished your PCC, you have over 276 hours of coach-specific training, which means as far as the ICF goes, you are actually certified to be a master credentialed coach because of your training, the number of hours of training, if you have more than 2,500 hours of coaching, which takes about 10 years. PCC, 750 hours, it takes about 3 to 4 years. If you're coaching a lot. If you're coaching pretty much, you know. So I've been doing this for, what, 13, 14 years, if I can't even count. And I've got about 3,500 coaching hours. In South Africa, I think there are about 10 MCC coaches. Okay, so not a lot of people get to this stage, but that's if you want to be individually credentialed. You need training that they recognize, ideally. Otherwise, it's very onerous to get certified to the ICF.
So to become a PCC, we still have to start from the ACC.
Yes.
Then the 6 months later, you get accredited from the ACC to become, then the other 6 months becomes, then you finish the 6 months to be a PCC.
Well, this is 6 months. ACC is 6 months, and this is 1 year.
So you can't do step 2 without doing
No.
that. So
No.
you do 1.
So it's 1, 2, and I didn't get yet to the, what happens after PCC section, which we have a mastery school, a 3-year cycle of modules, but don't worry about that. That's just knowing there's something to do after that. But yeah, it's about 18 months, or 2 calendar years if you're doing the whole journey. And then you're in South Africa, this is the most rigorous and extensive training available. I don't think there's another suite that takes you through to the ICF PCC level, or this actually takes you to master coach level of training. I don't think there's another suite of programs. There are other year-long programs in South Africa for you to look at.
So,
yeah. Okay.
Just a clarification. If you are saying with the ACC program there are 3 or 4 people that you are coaching, what are we talking in terms of sessions? Is there stipulation? You can't just have 1, you must have 6 or
Yes.
work.
So on average 6. So for the first case study you'll have 3 or 4 sessions because it's a shorter time. But for the second and third cases we'd like, between 6 to 8. Yeah. Sorry, you had another question. You forgot. Okay.
oh, sorry.
Okay.
So that you have to do, for the ACC, you must do all those courses and the hours.
For the ACC, you can do either just the 6-month course, or you can do the 6-month and the year-long program.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm finishing now. So if you don't want to be an individual, if you do just the stage 1,
Yes.
day 1, and you don't do the 100 hours, or you do just the minimum requirement, does that mean that you can't become an individual coach? How does that work?
Okay, you absolutely can. You can, and in fact, you must start coaching even after Module 1 of the ACC. And after Module 1, after you've finished 90 hours of coach-specific training, you are already better trained than 80% of the coaches in South Africa. Okay, because most coaching programs in South Africa are not as rigorous as just our first 6-month program. So you can, with absolute pride, go out and call yourself a coach and go out there and coach. Absolutely. It's only if you want to be under the ICF logo. It's only if you want to be credentialed as an ICF coach. But you have absolute right, because why? The certificate comes from UCT Business School. It comes from the Center for Coaching, which is very well known in the coaching circles, and also from New Ventures West, which is from the USA. So you go to the USA with this qualification and everybody will know who New Ventures West is. Okay. So it's also, it's accredited also from the Health Professionals Council as part of their continuous education units as well. So it's got a lot of credibility. So the ICF isn't the only one. And certainly Comensa will recognize this program as well, seeing as they're their benchmark program, actually, which is rather nice.
So then you've been accredited, after you do that ACC, you'll be an accredited coach?
Yes. Well, you'll be accredited, yes, through us and New Ventures West and the business schools. You will not be an ICF accredited coach. You will have done an ICF accredited course. Can you see the difference? They're quite specific about, but people who employ coaches are very careful now, mainly because I think over all the years we were the first coaching school to open in South Africa, and I think just about every single senior HR professional seems to have come through. In the beginning years we ran a 2-day program, and I think just about every single corporate HR professional came through our doors back then. So, and then those days weren't in the most senior post, but now They are, and they know, and if they haven't, they may not have done the 6-month and the year-long course, but many people who are on our programs are actually in the top echelon of training and talent development and things like that. So these corporates know what good looks like. Yeah. Question?
Does this give you CPD points as well? Is that what I get? CPD points?
With the HPCSA?
Yeah.
Yes. If you are accredited with the HPCSA.
Yes. Right. Oh yeah, it's down here as ethical CEUs, and so you get 20 general CEUs and 5 ethical CEUs on level 3. I hope that means something to you, because it doesn't. So whatever that means, yes. But they accredited us just like that, really. Yeah, they didn't have a moment's worry. So that was also nice for me to know, because I wasn't sure, because often there's challenges between health professionals. Yeah. Okay, I'm mindful of the time, and I know that it's also nice if you want to chat to, perhaps I could invite Jean and Jessica to maybe just stand up and say a few words about what integral coaching is, how you use it as professionals, and what it's meant for you.
We're fighting about who's going first. So I'm Jean. I'm a coach in a financial organization, so I'm an internal coach. So I do a lot of coaching as a volunteer, because that's not my main job. I'm also a regional sales manager. What integral coaching has taught me is even in my sales space, you can fundamentally change a team. So I am now so passionate about that they even fly me up into Namibia and Malawi to help the senior executives in the organization I work for, because they have seen the value in it as well. But for fun, I have my own practice as well, just so I can see something fun as well. So thank you.
And she's one of our mentors on the ACC and the PCC program. So, thank you.
Okay, my name is Jessica, and graduated in March, so I'm still very new. But yes, I retired from corporate, and I'm coaching full-time. And I didn't attend the sessions before I started in 2011, and this is for me eye-opening, even the fact that I'm graduated. And I would definitely recommend it to anyone that wants to consider coaching as a future career. From my side, there's definitely a need for coaching in the system. Coming from a corporate environment, I was fortunate to work with a coach, and that was also the reason why I decided that I want to take it further, and I want to invest in it, because personal development remains important for all of us. And yes, good luck with your decisions at the end of the day.
Any other questions? I mean, we could keep going all night, but yeah.
Yeah, so maybe this was already discussed when I came in a little bit later, but you touched on an interesting point where you say that there's still a need. I feel that the market is getting a little bit overflooded with coaches, and you made a reference to the fact that in this particular course you actually gain more experience, more, I think, recognized training hours than most coaching education in South Africa offers, which I find quite a scary fact. So it seems to me that because accreditation seems to be quite an issue, that there's a lot of coaches out there, or people that call themselves coaches. So for people who actually go through the ACC, do you see an actual opportunity in out there professionally?
Yeah, I mean, look, and Jessica and well, Jean's an internal coach, so you know that's. But you'll notice it's not her day job. So even now, very few organizations will hire an internal coach. So, but most coaches, most people who come to us, the days of having these enormously highly paying clients and earning a fortune of money from coaching are long gone. I mean, the fees that we can charge now are less than what we charged 10 years ago. It's like half of what we would charge 10 years ago. So in the beginning years, there was the glamour associated with coaching. People now are much more careful about their coaching spend, but they also want to make it stretch further. And you know, most people, and Jessica, you can comment, but most people who study with us say that it takes them 2 to 3 years to build up a coaching practice. So I don't know if you would say that.
Like I said, I'm new. I retired and it became my thinking that coaching will become my second career, only when I was already busy with my studies. But yes, it's not easy to put, to start off your own practice because you need to market yourself. You do compete with, obviously, with the other stakeholders in the market, being established people. And I think it depends on individuals. My focus is not to build a practice with immediately and to have 1,000 clients. That is not my intention. I've got a small focus and I also want to specialize in terms of my coaching. I come from a financial background and that is my focus. That is how I link coaching to money, and that is what I present to the community out there. And it works for me. And there's a huge market for financial coaching out there.
So what more and more coaches are doing is saying, okay, what's my niche? How will I sell my services? And they're specializing much more carefully, as opposed to just saying, oh, I can coach, who needs a coach? So it's your network. You don't get coaching clients by advertising, people refer you. It's being known. So, having a network, and even then, making a huge income out of coaching is very difficult. So most professional coaches who are on their own they'll do coaching, but they'll also have something else like facilitation or consulting or whatever, so that you're not, because you can only charge for the hours that you coach.
So, but Janine, on that, the knowledge you get out of doing this program, you can actually do leadership development programs from it as well, because the core material that you get, you can actually run different programs.
Yeah. So for those who have other areas of interest, but in other words, just being a pure coach, how does one build that? You build it over time through reputation and through practice and getting out there and coaching. There isn't a magic wand. No, I guess not. No. So anyone who says, yeah, it's easy, I think no.
I didn't expect that, but I was wondering about your opinion with regards to the overflooding of the market, which is call themselves a coach.
I think the market is overflooded. It certainly was overflooded at a certain stage with people who had no qualifications and who wanted to coach executives without executive experience or without a track record, and thought they could just walk in and charge big fees just because they have a label coach. And I think those are the people who've come horribly short, because those are the people, they don't have the backing behind them. Whereas the people who start off, when I started coaching, I coached junior managers, and then I went to middle management and senior, and slowly. That's how I did it. Other people who come from a CEO background, for example, they've got a network of peers in that community. They can start there, but their coaching improves over time. And although they would never admit it, I know that the coaching they did after their first year of study is not the same as their coaching they're doing now 3 or 4 years later. So everyone has an experience curve, but it's who you know. The great thing is you do build a community in the course itself. And often you get to know, I'm still in touch with my fellow podlings from my ACC, never mind my PCC. And we still work together and support each other and cross-reference. You form a real community of practice that doesn't just dissolve at the end of the course. So quite often people get together and come up with projects and create ideas, from the actual class that they're in.
Is there an alumni? Is there an official alumni organization within the St. Coaching?
No.
They're being pushed for it.
Yeah, we're being pushed for it. So we find that our alumni, so we have an informal alumni because we have this huge mentoring body. So we bring back our graduates, say, come and mentor, and then the mentor group forms and they enrich their learning again and deepen it. So, and with our graduate class, Do we run like this alumni evenings or stuff? Not at this stage. Not at this stage. But informally, you guys are always networking, and I mean, they get up to all sorts of things. I don't even know about. I don't get invited to all the things they get up to, but I hear about it from time to time. So there's a lot going on in the integral community. It's not arranged by us. Yeah. Okay, so I think it's pretty much 8 o'clock. Please feel free to chat to any of us further if you like, and we hope to see you again soon. You never know.
Our relevant question that you can choose to do the 6 months or the 1 year. Now you are saying you have to start at the 6 months and go to the 1 year. That's why I'm saying the way you need to do this is there, because I came to a talk. That's the intention I had. That's why I say I came to the talk and I was giving, like I'm saying, a guinea pig for the weekend. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The way you, as I came to this, that's how it came out to me. You can choose to do the 6 months. That's what came to me. You can choose to do the 6 months or to do the 1 year. Yeah, that's how it's different. Because I came to the job and then I don't say what we pick for the weekend. What we want to do. You have graduates to the weekend. That's on the piece.
Yes, in the past, that is the 1 year. And by the time people come back, nobody says no. Sorry. Not one of them. And so unlearning the skills and those is actually harder than so there is an element of frustration because of that. Yeah. But nobody, if you like, in particular, what I could ask him was the number of counselors because I think it's I haven't done that training, but I know they always struggle. They always say the best things.
Because I can feel it in the way I deal with clients and also in general, so that's very good sort of deep enrichment in the first way. But I'm just supposed to if I was to try to find it, I don't know. But that'd be great. Was something to think, hang on, that's kind of where that's coming from. Fantastic, I'll speak to you. Thank you. Thank you.
Come back to me if you want to explore more.
Fantastic, I will do. Yeah. Cheers, thank you.
Thanks for demystifying it.
Oh, does that help?
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
Can you look at normal industries like the industry is so interested in mining industries and things like that. That's why so many people come. I don't spend a lot of money for specialized I'm going to charge a percentage, so I'll charge, I'll trade. Come to this sort of thing.
So much knowledge built up over a period of time. Like a lot of free consulting, like I get invited to all sorts of forums, like the ETI forums and the Alpha forums.